I tested out a SIG P365 X Macro for a few months and 1,000 rounds. And I'm going to share with you the results of that testing in this video. I think I got to know this pistol pretty well. And at the end of this video, I'm going to answer a few questions. One, did I enjoy shooting this gun? Two, would I carry it? Three, were there any frustrations? Four, were there any malfunctions? And five, is it worth the price that SIG is currently charging for this gun? I'll answer all those questions and a whole lot more. So stick around. Okay, so if you've watched any of my other videos, you probably know that I have a pretty strong opinion about one of SIG's other products. But I want to tell you that I went into this review with a completely open mind, blank slate. I wasn't going to let any of those other opinions sway what I felt about the P365 X Macro. This gun is a loaner, and it's a loaner from a good friend, Brian. Brian, thank you very much. I appreciate your putting up with my keeping the gun for as long as I did. It ended up taking longer than I thought to get to where I ended up being. But that said, thank you so much, sir. I'll have this gun back to you by the time this video airs. It should already be in your dirty little mitts, and maybe a little extra gift to go with it because of how long I had it. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you.
Whenever you're
ready.
Okay,
first, let me talk about the ergonomics and the controls of this gun. First, in terms of size, I don't know that I can call this a compact gun, but I can't really call it a full-size gun either because it has aspects of both. This is the equivalent of your size extra medium shirt, I guess. It does fit my hand with a full grip, as you can see, like I can get all of my fingers on this gun. So from that perspective, it is almost full size, and it's very comfortable in the hand. That little extra beaver tail at the back really kind of locks my grip in and keeps me from running into the slide back here, which would certainly be an owie if that happened, but there's no worry with that. The grips have interchangeable back straps, which is a first for the P365 line and SIG. Now this one's covered over with some grip tape, but if your hand is a little bigger or a little smaller, SIG kind of gave you the provision to use a different size back strap if you wanted. In addition, because SIG's got the actual fire control unit inside the grip itself and not the grip, that means that for, you know, 50 bucks or so, you could completely swap out this grip module if you wanted to. I'm sure there are a bunch of aftermarket companies that are going to make grip modules that will fit this. And they probably already have. I just haven't researched down that rabbit hole. But in general, guys, your grip options when it comes to this gun, I don't want to say they're unlimited, but they're darn close. Like there's a lot you can do with this gun when it comes to grip. So if you've got small hands, big hands, in between hands, weird shaped hands, probably there's an option for you. When it comes to the controls themselves, I found the magazine release to be fine. I never really noticed it. Like I didn't have to hunt for it or go, oh, I need to eject the mag and do weird stuff to find the magazine release. So that was a easy thing. If I don't have to think about it, in my mind, that is good to go. The slide catch I found to be a little bit small. It took me just a little bit of practice to get used to using it. Once I did, it wasn't too bad. And as I'm a lefty, I usually use my index finger to send the slide forward. If you are a righty, it's going to land right where your thumb is. So that's easy for you as well. But like I said, it is small. It's not really designed like a competition gun or anything, although it has aspects of that as well. But in general, the overall ergonomics and controls are pretty darn cool on this gun, especially for a small or compact gun. Now, it's not directly part of the gun, but it is in my case. Let's talk about optics. These guns come from the factory, all of them with the provision to be able to mount optics if you so choose. And there are some packages that give you one of the SIG optics to go with it. Now you will notice this is not a SIG optic that's currently on this gun. It is not. It could have been and was for a little bit. The SIG Romeo Zero optic is one of the options you can bundle with this gun. So you can turnkey buy the gun with that SIG optic. And if you didn't know any better, it would seem like a really enticing or appealing option, because for $1,000 you can get the gun and the optic good to go, ready to go with no worries. But in my experience, I found that the SIG optic had some issues. Now, in general, let me talk about the SIG optic. On the surface, it seems like a pretty cool thing. It is American made, and it's made in the SIG factory with a machine that is automation. It completely does all of the work. And it's designed to be a low-cost optic that, like I said, once again, is made onshore here in America.
If the optic were
What's
good,
not to like? Well, here's the list. One, the optic housing and the lens are both polymer. And while I don't know that that's 100% deal breaker, I have doubts that it will put up to any sort of rigorous carry or abuse. Not that I want you to throw your gun down the street or do any of that crazy stuff, but in the real world, it's been my experience that stuff happens. And so I'm concerned about that. But that wasn't the worst part. Like, I could forgive that. Two, the entire underside of the optic is completely open, so all the electronics are exposed, which means that if you want this thing to be water resistant, sweat resistant, or whatever, that you're gonna need an intermediary barrier between the optic itself and the gun, and that is kind of a pain in the butt. Three, if and when that battery decides to die, and every battery on the planet dies sooner or later, you have to completely dismount the optic to swap batteries. Now, I know that was cool like 10 years ago, but now we've way moved past that. Every new offering that's out these days, to the best of my knowledge, has the provision to have an external battery somewhere where you can unscrew something or pull something out and then swap the battery much easier. Next, the control on that SIG optic. There is one button that does everything. Turns it on, turns it off, adjusts the brightness. And so you really have to do various combinations of pushing the button or holding the button to get it to do what you want it to do. That I found to be confusing and frustrating. Lastly, when it came to the elevation and windage, adjusting them, a small hex wrench is what's used to adjust them. There are no tactile or audible clicks, so it's really kind of screw it around and hope you're in the neighborhood, shoot it, screw it around, try again. And the one example that I did have that came with this gun originally, I could not get it to zero any closer than, I want to say 10 inches high at 10 yards, which means when you go back to 25 yards, you start shooting either the ceiling if you're in an indoor range, or you start looking at cranking rounds over the berm if you're in an outdoor range, depending on the height of the berm. None of those are ideal. I could not get that optic to zero any lower. So off it went, and the hollow sun went on right after it. Now the hollow sun, when I screwed it on, it was darn close to dead on at 10 yards. And within, I think, 3 or 4 adjustments, it was good to go at 25 yards. And the last 3 rounds that I shot were all in the X-ring on a B8 bullseye at 25 yards, which in my mind is super accurate, especially for what is, once again, we're gonna call it a compact pistol for our purposes here. You know, there's another counter argument, and you could say that it is a small full-size pistol, and I'd accept that that argument has merit. It's certainly not without worth, but we'll get to it. But in general, if you're gonna get one of these and put an optic on it, I think really honestly, either the Hollow Sun 507K, 407K, or the EPS carry would be your jam. All of those will mount directly to this gun without any other plates or adapters. It just screws right down, and all of the Hollow Sun optics in my testing and experience have been bomb-proof. At this point, I think I probably own something like 4 or 5 Hollow Sun optics. I have never had to send one back to the factory. The only Hollow Sun product I have ever had to send back was one of their lights, and they immediately repaired it and shipped it back to me. So in general, guys, I'm pretty bullish about Hollow Sun. I think they're a quality optic. It's an American-made company, by the way. I realize their manufacturing is done offshore, but they're an American company, good product. But I'll say no more about the optic. We'll leave it at that. But if you are going to buy one of these and do an optic, do yourself a favor. Avoid the SIG Romeo Zero. Just avoid it. If there's any other optic that you can possibly put on that gun or afford, then you know where my recommendation lies, but definitely not with the SIG optic. So when it comes to the size of this gun, I most directly in my mind kind of compare it to a Glock 19. And there are reasons for that, although the Glock 19 is really kind of based off of the full-size frame Glocks, and obviously the SIG P365 X Macro is based off of the slim frame SIGs. But in terms of feature set and sizing, I think there's more that is alike than different between those, and I did a little tabletop of that, so I'll just go to that one. Tabletop Jade, take it away. One thing I would like to do, let's talk about the size of the P365, and I'm going to talk about it in relation to the Glock 19. Now, this Glock 19 has a bunch of extra junk on it to include a comp and a magwell, but let's just talk about it minus this comp. If you look at the front to back, and I'm talking the widest point, this beaver tail part here, the Glock 19 is still longer. Obviously this comp makes it longer, but if you look, even before the comp, you can see that the Glock 19 is longer than this gun. And if I set them both up like this, they are legitimately the same height. But the real difference, guys, the real difference is the width. If you look at the width of the Glock 19 over here, the SIG P365, then the SIG is so much thinner. And when it comes to concealability, guys, this is kind of the money. I've found that when it comes to concealability, this feels so much easier to conceal than this. Not that the 19's hard to conceal for some people, but the 365 X Macro, in this case, owing to that thinner dimension, it is much more concealable, at least to me. Now, like I said, the way you dress might be completely different. And also, I should mention, this is, I think, ever so slightly lighter than the Glock 19. Now, I realize that some of this is the overall weight of the comp, but this gun is lighter. It's a less of a burden. Not this is a horrible gun, you know, far from it. But you're talking a gun that is heavier, is longer, is wider, and carries less ammunition, unless you put an extended magazine in it, than this gun. And that's an interesting trade-off, You know, do I consider this a real compact, like a compact gun? I don't know. You know, that market is a very entertaining market, and it's ever evolving. But if we just compare it pure size to probably one of the staples of carry, the Glock 19, this gun comes out ahead on 3 metrics, right? Length, width, and weight. It wins. And then we compare that to the fact that it carries 2 more rounds. An interesting comparison indeed. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about actually shooting this gun, actually getting on the range, sending rounds down range. In general, I found this gun to feel just a little bit snappier than shooting a full-size Glock or even a mid-size Glock. Obviously, physics is a real thing. This gun weighs 5 ounces less than a Glock 19. And that 5 ounces, while it doesn't seem like a lot, like the Glock 19 was like 1.8, 1 pound, 8 ounces, sorry, and this was 1 pound, 3 ounces, both unloaded. But in terms of the shootability factor, this feels a little snappier. Not overwhelmingly so, not painfully so, but you can tell that. But that said, despite being snappy, it shoots really flat. Like, I didn't find the muzzle rise to be egregious like it is on some smaller guns where you're really fighting the gun. Obviously, I give a lot of credit to the compensation ports on this gun that really kind of address the muzzle rise factor. Probably not as much as a full-size comp would or a dedicated comp, but having these slide comp cuts in the front, it does make a difference, and I could tell that difference. I shot it at speed, I shot it for groups, I shot different drills with it, and I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this gun when it came to shooting it. In fact, when it comes to shooting Bills or Blakes, I think that I was faster with this gun than I am with a Glock 19. Like, I repeatedly shot multiple Blake drills, which is 5 rounds instead of 6, and was doing it just under 2 seconds repeatedly, which tells me my build time is probably going to be somewhere between 2.1, 2.2, and it was not a fluke. Like, I just kept doing it, and the accuracy was good, the speed was good, the ability to keep the dot in the window while I was running this gun at speed was there. And like I said, I think it was better than I see with a mid-size to full-size Glock. The one vagary that I found was shooting bullseyes at distance, because the trigger feel to me is really interesting. There's a lot of effort initially, I say a lot, but the vast majority of the effort is initial. And then right before the break, I feel almost a let off. And so it feels like I'm putting effort, and then it just kind of easily goes over that hump. When I was shooting at speed, that did not bother me. But when I was shooting slow fire, doing my level best to get the most perfect hits, right before the trigger breaks, it feels like it accelerates and just jumps over that hoop. And that caused me to lose just a little bit of accuracy when I was doing 25-yard bullseye. Now you're probably saying, Jay, who cares about that? Well, it's, you know, it's a concern for me, not the ultimate concern, but I want any gun that I am shooting to be able to shoot quickly up close and at distance. Now, was it a deal breaker? No, I'm not going to say that, because even though that the right before the break feels weird, I was still shooting 80s, like 88s, 89s on the bullseye at 25 yards. Normally with a full-size Glock, I'd end up shooting in the 90s for the most part. Low 90s is my normal. And I think with some practice and maybe some acclimatization to this trigger, I could shoot it just as well as a full-size Glock when it comes to doing bullseye shooting. So please don't say that Jay doesn't like the trigger. Jay's just not used to the trigger. The fact of the matter is that I have so many thousands of rounds downrange of the Glock that getting used to this thing, it's just not what I'm used to. But it still shot well. I mean, especially for an unfamiliar trigger setup, I was not unhappy with the bullseyes that I scored. I was shooting some other drills like the Dave Spalding's 5-yard fuck off, and I was shooting that in the same realm as I was shooting full-size guns. I shot the super test with it and shot a 283 out of 300, and that was the one and only time I shot a super test with this gun. Normally, when I shoot super tests, if I'm feeling it, I'll shoot several in a row, but I have shot one super test with this gun, the end of story, and shot a 283. I have shot worse, once again, with a full-size gun on the super test. I think with just a little more practice, could I have shot a 290 or higher? Yeah, definitely. No braggadocio, I just think it's eminently doable with this gun. In general, shooting it is pretty freaking awesome. So I cannot complain about the shooting. It was fun. It didn't beat me up, and it gave me good results. Okay, so I've talked a lot about the good of this gun, and there is a lot, but I don't want to sell you the dream and pretend like I had no issues, no problems, no frustrations. You already know my frustration with the optic, and I don't blame the gun itself for that. I just blame a different SIG product, because they're kind of all over the map. But the gun in general, I'm liking it, but I'll get to it. One, I shot 1,000 rounds through this gun. I had one malfunction, round 903. I've had one malfunction, and I literally just had it.
What is it?
It failed to feed on one of them. Didn't quite all the way feed in the middle of one string of fire. And dude, I haven't cleaned or lubed it since I did it when I first got it. Have not cleaned or lubed it since, so I don't know that I'm really even going to blame the gun on it. Because as small as it is, I think if you don't keep it at least a little bit cleaned and lubed, you know, you're asking a lot of a gun that's, you know, got a barrel that's that long, dude. So then I was keeping track because I had boxes of ammo, so I was down to the last 2 boxes. The first 10 rounds in that gun of the last 2 boxes, round number 3 choked, and it just did not feed all the way in. I cleared it, I tap racked, and then I continued to shoot and load mags and shoot, and the last rounds all the way up to the end, no more malfunctions. So that one malfunction, was it the gun? Was it the ammo? Was it me? Was it planetary alignment? I don't know. I'm really not going to blame the gun on that malfunction. It was blazer brass ammo, by the way, which I've had very good results with, but sooner or later everything gets goofy, so you know, maybe it was the ammunition. Also, I'll tell you that I never cleaned and lubricated this gun during the entire test. I lubricated it right before I started, and then I never ever applied any more oil or cleaning or wiping down to anything, with the exception of if the lens on the optic started to get a little bit schmutzed up from gunpowder residue, I would clean that. And that's about really all I would do. I think that with the comp cuts in the slide, that more heat is kind of getting blown back at the barrel, and it probably causes the lubrication to evaporate a little faster than it would on a non-compensated gun or a non-similar gun to this. Like a conventional gun, I think you could literally go 2,000 rounds, no worries. But for this gun, 1,000 rounds between oil is probably a little bit much. I think if I were going to carry this gun or run it, I would probably wipe it down and lube it every 300 to 500 rounds. Not that I think you couldn't get away with more, because obviously I did, absent that one malfunction. And like I said, Blazer Brass ammo, well, it's good ammo. It's not ultra premium ammo like Federal HST. So could it have just been a bum round that just didn't quite have enough sauce to get the gun to fully cycle? 100% that could happen. Another downside to this gun, I say downside, it has 17 round magazines. And that is in my opinion, sort of an engineering miracle to, in this size gun, get 17 rounds. Super skinny, super short, but they do. And I think that you're really kind of at the ragged edge of what you can get into that size magazine. And even after I had those magazines quite broken in, getting round 17 in there was a chore every time to this day. After all 1,000 rounds, round number 17, and I repeatedly loaded it to 17, with the exception of times where I was running some drills that were running reloads and things like that. And it never got a lot easier. It got a little bit easier, but those magazines are stiff, so that is a point of consideration. I think one more thing that I'd mention is, because the slide is so narrow, this optic kind of hangs off just slightly on both sides. And apparently how I hold the gun is more akin to this, with this thumb right there. And then during recoil, sometimes the corner of my strong hand thumb would hit the optic. And it wasn't catastrophic. It wasn't like, oh my God, the world is ending. But I'd shoot a string and I'd have like a little owie on my thumb. So I had to kind of learn to relax that thumb even more and get it out here rather than in here. Because in here, that was where the owies happened. And guys, like I said, that's not the end of the world. For 99% of the population, it's probably not even a factor. I just noticed it, so it's just something to consider. I do want to mention very quickly, field stripping this gun, taking it apart, cleaning it, general maintenance. Taking this gun apart is easier than a Glock. Glocks are a little bit fiddly. Once you get used to them, they're easy. But they do have the fiddle factor, and I see this pretty much every other week because I train a lot of people who are pretty new, and watching people who are inexperienced with Glocks when it comes to disassembling and reassembling a Glock, it can be entertaining until they figure out the trick, and there really is a trick when it comes to Glocks. With this one, it's simple. You lock the slide to the rear, you rotate that little takedown lever right there, oop, which is stiff, but that's good. I don't want it freewheeling. And then once you have that down, you pull the slide to the rear, take it forward, they come apart, just like any other gun at that point when it comes to taking the recoil assembly and the barrel out. And then when you want to put it back, it's just the opposite. You put the slide on, lock it to the rear, rotate that lever, goes right back on. Easy. It's easy, easy, easy. And even an idiot like yourself, yours truly, can do that with no problem. 9 times out of 10, the takedown lever, once you hit the rear and lock it to the rear, the takedown lever rotates back into place for you. So now you can hit the slide catch and you're good to go. Easy to take apart, easy to clean, easy to maintain. Oh, and to take this apart, we don't have to press the trigger, which, look, I know everybody's got their own thoughts on Glocks and pressing the trigger to disassemble them. It is not a hypothetical that can cause an issue for some people who are less than attentive. We don't have that issue with this. So field stripping, cleaning, and putting back together, it's a pretty safe endeavor with this gun, and it's pretty easy to do. Lastly, let's talk about value. When last I looked, this gun was running for around $800 without the optic and $1,000 with the SIG optic, which we've already discussed. So $800. I could go buy a Glock 43X for around 500 bucks. So there's a $300 price difference between this and the, in effect, nearest Glock competitor, the 43X. What do you get for that 300 bucks? Well, for starters, you get a compensator. And if I wanted to add a compensator to the Glock, all the compensators that I've seen out there, like the Parker Mountain machine, every single one of them is 320 to 360 bucks. So if you want to put a comp on your Glock 43X, now you're talking another 300 bucks over. And so you have now exceeded the cost of this gun just with that comp. And even if you want to say that it's sort of equivalent, this still holds 17 rounds. The Glock 43X has 10 round magazines. Now, yes, you could run out and get shield magazines, and there are at least one or two other companies out there now making 15 round magazines for the Glock 43X. But even after you purchased several magazines that are anywhere from 40 to 60 bucks or maybe more, you're still only running around 15 round magazines as opposed to the 17 round mags on this one. So I've got to tell you that, at least from the perspective of looking at closest competitors and how much they cost and what they bring to the table, I still think this is worth it. Could it be cheaper? Yes. Has SIG decided on the price point that they think is worthwhile? Yes. Are people buying it at $800? Also, yes. So if I'm going to answer the question, is it worth it? Right now, really kind of yes, I think it is. So let me start to close this down because I've talked long enough. I'm not trying to sell you the dream and say this gun is perfect, but it is a good gun. And in general, I liked it. And also, I think at some point I'll probably buy my own. You know, if it meets your needs in terms of size, capacity, how it shoots, the features that it has, then I don't know that you're going to be able to do better for the same amount of money. You could build your own, because some people have, like, they've actually put together like a random parts list. I know that several companies are making aftermarket slides for the P365. Several companies are making compensators. You could, with a set of aftermarket parts, equal what you've got here. No lie, you could. I don't think you'd do it for the same amount of money. I very much enjoy this gun. You probably doubtless aware of the safety systems in this gun versus some other guns out there. And while I don't necessarily think the ones in the P365 series are perfect, I think they are much more robust than the P320 series. I have carried this gun, will carry this gun, appendix even. I have no safety concerns about this gun because of the simplicity and robustness of these setups, of these springs and these safeties inside this gun. So I don't hate it from that regard either. Oh, there is one more little nitpick, and I didn't experience this, but Brian did. The rear sight on this gun, and in some cases some of the slides, will get surface rust. I don't know that this was universal across the board. It might have just been one or two runs of these guns, but if I were you and I was carrying this, especially if you're not carrying it with like a t-shirt or something in between you and the gun, I would just keep a real sharp eye on anywhere that this gun is contacting you. And if you start to see any rust at all, guys, I'd wipe that off. I'd clean it off as quickly as possible. Now, I don't know if SIG will address that. If you send it back, I have no idea. In my opinion, they should, because modern finishes are pretty rust resistant. Now, anything can rust given enough time. Sweat is pretty nasty, right? There's salt in it and everything. But that said, do watch out if you do pick up one of these, that the possibility of rust around the back of the gun, it is possible. A foregone conclusion, no, but possible. Just keep an eye out. So one more thing in conclusion. Is this a compact gun? Maybe. Is it a full-size gun? Almost. It is kind of a size extra medium shirt. It kind of bridges the gap. So I don't know that it does any one thing perfectly, but it does a lot of things really well. In my testing when shooting drills, I was shooting this almost as good as full-size guns, and in some cases better. I think that if I spent just a little more time with this gun, I could probably shoot it just as good as a Glock 17 or a Glock 19. And I don't say that to brag. I think that SIG has kind of hit it out of the park with the ergos and the features and how this gun shoots. So I've got to give them really big credit on that. Guys, if you've enjoyed this video at all, please do give me a like. And if you enjoy content like this, a subscription would certainly be appreciated. If you got all the way to this point in the video and you absolutely hated it, thank you very much for watching, and I appreciate you. Any questions or feedback, guys, hit me in the comments, let me know. I'm gonna end this here. You guys take care, stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon.
Get 'em, Jay.